Hello and welcome to this short video for Class 14 for Introduction to Philosophy. So, in this class, we head into skepticism. And there are videos for skepticism, and we also head to look at the start of our good dead friend Rene Descartes, French philosopher, died a while ago, still dead today. So, skepticism. In everyday life, if someone says, I'm a skeptic, or I'm skeptical about that, or I'm, like a skeptical about climate change, etc. What someone is saying essentially is they doubt it. And in everyday life, it's just an expression of doubt. It could be principled doubt based on, good reasons, that there's a lack of evidence, etc. Or it could just be kind of a feeling that one should not trust something. So philosophically, what is skepticism? Well, philosophically, a philosophical skeptic is someone who believes or purports to believe in general terms that we lack knowledge, that we don't know stuff. And of course, a consistent skeptic doesn't say that we don't know. They would try to say we seem to not know stuff. Because if you're a skeptic, you deny knowledge. And skepticism comes in varying degrees, kind of like with political commitments. You could be pretty moderate, or you could be pretty extreme. And so moderate skeptics tend to have doubts about things that are pretty extreme in the sense that they're, kind of unusual. So a moderate skeptic may have doubts about metaphysics. So if you ask them about like the soul, they might say, well, you can't know about stuff like that because it's beyond our knowledge. I'm skeptical. But they could still accept things like empirical science, mathematics, logic, etc. And so they're skeptical in that they have a principled reason to doubt proof of things, typically like metaphysical stuff. One could, of course, be more skeptical, extending it out there, doubting more stuff. So, what's called sometimes a global or extreme skeptic would take the view, somewhat extreme, would take the view that you can't trust, virtually anything except for things like mathematics and logic because they're a priori truths. Triangles having three sides, that's always true because it's true by definition. Now, the most extreme skeptics, the super global or extreme skeptics, they doubt everything. This would include mathematics, logic, etc. And our good dead friend Descartes, who we'll look at in the future, he starts off kind of like doubting the senses, and then he extends that to doubt everything. So he kind of transitions from kind of extreme skepticism to really extreme skepticism. But he's doing what is called methodological skepticism. As we'll see, he's not doubting for the sake of doubting, he's doubting in order to find certainty. Now, there are a lot of different types of skeptics throughout philosophical history. There's probably one of the best known is Pyrrho. He's a skeptic and dead. Then there's the academic skeptics that arose in Plato's Academy. And then there are Agrippa and others. So lots of skeptics in philosophical history, and they all have different views. Now, to sort of smush everything together, here are some two kind of standard skeptical arguments that they make. And they do argue, so some critics have pointed out, hey, you're using logic, so don't you believe in logic? But here's one argument. So when it comes to the problem of the external world, like how do you know this stuff out there, one very, very old argument that's later picked up on by people like Descartes is this problem. So if I accept that I have ideas, thoughts that represent what's out there, the problem is, how do I know that what I'm experiencing in my mind matches what is out there? And the problem is that I can never get outside of my own mind to see like the idea in my mind and the stuff out there. And the usual metaphor I use is imagine kind of like a Black Mirror or like, horror story where a person awakens in a room, with no memories. And there's like monitors all around them, and they're tasked with determining whether what's on the monitor is real or not. And of course, if they're sealed in this room and all they can do is look at the monitors, they have no way of telling. They can't get outside the room to confirm. They're trapped. And our situation is like that. We're, metaphorically speaking, trapped within a room full of, monitors. and we have our experiences, etc., inside our minds, but we can never get outside of our own mind to see what's really out there. And so the skeptics, going way back, have made that argument. Obviously, though, like monitors, etc., the argument that if you have no way of telling that what's in here, if there's any here, matches what's out there. And the skeptics always bring up the question, like, how do you know? How would you do this? And Descartes and others have tried to address that, and the general consensus today is no one has succeeded. You just can't do it. Now, another argument they use very generally is that what philosophers typically try to do against their fellow philosophers, the skeptics, is come up with some kind of standard. Something you could use, a principle that you could use to determine if something is true or not, that in standards of knowledge. I can know this if these conditions are met, and if these conditions are met, then I know this thing. And in terms of practical stuff, this would be, practical problems like, well, take an example like a legal trial. You'd have a standard of evidence. And if you're familiar with like criminal law stuff, it's something that is true beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's established as something, that's a way to establish it as, well, true beyond reasonable doubt. Now, in the case of epistemology, philosophers usually try to have a much higher standard. They often push for certainty. And they'll advance a standard like, this if you meet these conditions. So, for example, Descartes, to use him as an example, he comes up with this thing of like clear and distinct. That if you mentally, clearly and distinctly, understand something, then you know that it's true. Now, you probably see where the skeptic is, what they're going to do, which is if I present a standard, like if I perceive it clearly and distinctly, it's true, a skeptic is going to say, well, how do you know that principle is true? So if I can't give any answer, then I would seem to lose to the skeptic. Because if I say, I don't know, they would say, exactly, you don't know. But if I give a reason, if I say what is clear and distinct is knowable because it's guaranteed by, God's goodness, then they would say, well, how do you know that God exists and God is good? And then I'd give an argument, I'd say, well, by this standard. And then they would say, well, how do you know that that standard is correct? And if I can't give any reason, they would say, well, I guess you don't know. And if I give a reason, they would say, how do you know? And this can go on, forever. So if I present a standard and I don't defend it, then I don't know. If I present a standard and I defend it, then they can always ask, how do you know? Which means I need to do another defense, and we're off one of those terrible infinite regresses. And there are other arguments that skeptics use, but those are kind of the two big ones. Essentially, like, how do you ever get outside your own mind? You can't, so you can't know stuff out there. And then the standard regress argument, that if you have the option of either giving no reason, in which case you don't know, or giving, defending your standard, in which case you have to defend the defense of the standard off to infinity and beyond. Now, skepticism was pretty popular for a while, way back, but it ended up declining. Kind of the main reason was competition. That, historically speaking, the skeptics essentially said, hey, you can't know stuff. And then people would say, well, what do? We still seem to have to do stuff. And the skeptics essentially said, kind of weirdly, they basically said, just do what everyone else does. And so the most extreme skeptic could be indistinguishable from a perfectly ordinary, everyday average person, because that was kind of their claim. Also, their appeal was that if you can't know stuff, essentially it was kind of a don't worry, be happy. If you can't know that things are really bad, why worry about it? And as you might suspect, the don't worry, be happy kind of philosophy wasn't terribly successful. And eventually skepticism, lost. And what did it lose to? Well, kind of the main competitor during, the Roman Empire, was the rise of Christianity in many ways. And that Christianity offered something, and other religions offered something other than just, hey, don't worry, be happy, offered something, in many ways more positive. And so skepticism kind of declined as something popular, but still obviously remains. I mean, there's still philosophical skeptics. We still have in our language skepticism. and so still a thing. Now, we'll look at our good dead friend Descartes as kind of the epitome of the attempt to fight skepticism, to try to solve that problem with the external world, to try to show that we can know for sure that this stuff out there. Does he succeed? Obviously not. Otherwise, I'd just say, hey, Descartes solved this problem, not a problem anymore. Now, as always, the readings and files you can download from here. These are all the notes from day one to the end, all the readings from day one to the end. The paper guide for the paper. For the coursework for class 14 is quiz number 14, which covers the introduction and history of skepticism. And like all the quizzes, 5 points, 5 questions, 5 minutes. And there's the due date, which is June 14th, which is when you probably should do it. And then there's the available until date, which is the important one, which is when you have to do it by, otherwise it won't be available. So that's the stuff for class number 14. So have a good day, stay safe, and I'll see you in the future.